Welcome to this edition of Dufferin Life. I'm your host, Tina Avery. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today we have a special guest. And I'm going to preface this by saying we're going to talk about some serious stuff today. As much as I love to have all the funny things happening, we're going to talk about a serious topic. And joining me today, we have the coordinator for the Suicide Awareness Council for Dufferin, Wellington-Dufferin, Heather Glenister. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Tina.
And this is not the first time you've been on the show before, so I'm going to say welcome back.
Thank you.
We're going to talk a little bit about, before we get into the nitty gritty of what we're going to talk about, let's let everyone and share with everyone what exactly the council does.
So the council has been in existence since 1999, and we are a collaborative of organizations and individuals who have come together for the purpose of raising awareness and prevention for suicide across Wellington and Dufferin. So we have had a long history, and I think there's been, it's certainly changed from 1999, the way we look at suicide, how we approach mental health. So it's certainly been an interesting journey for those of us who've been on the council for a lengthy period of time, and the organizations who have come and gone. So.
And you provide resources. So we want to be very clear that the council doesn't provide crisis services. Right. What they do is they provide resources and some general information and helping to make us more aware of it, because there is quite a stigma when we talk about suicide.
Very much so, Tina. And, I think certainly with COVID, it has opened up the conversation about mental health. And that's wonderful. However, suicide tends to get, sort of, what do I want to say? It's still under the radar. People don't want to talk about it. It's almost like it's a dirty word, because people don't know how to react to it. They don't know how to respond to it. There's a lot of fear around suicide as well. There's always that question, why? So it's sort of buried in that whole mental health, piece.
So, and that's why we're doing this, everyone. We're trying to take steps to break the stigma, to open the communication. And I mean, Heather will talk about this a little bit more, but, some of the things we may talk about may be disturbing for some of you, because we are going to spend the show talking about all different aspects of suicide and different resources and the good stuff too on how we can help people. Am I right, Heather?
Absolutely. And, I think through my work over the last almost 10 years, the council is about hope. We don't focus on all the, what do I want to call it? The sadness. Yes, we embrace it, but there is a lot of hope. And I think if, we can embrace that and people know that there is help out there, that it makes the conversation a little easier to have when we're looking through that, that lens of hope.
Well, let's talk about some of the myths and some of the facts about suicide that we hear often. And one of the ones that I want you to talk a little bit about is the fact that if you're talking about suicide, or you're talking to someone about suicide, that it makes them more apt and it brings them closer to suicide.
And that's a big myth. Oftentimes, if somebody, you're thinking that, maybe somebody is thinking they're not well, they're thinking about suicide, and I'm afraid to bring it up. I don't want to talk about it because it's going to sort of push them over the edge. And that's not true. Oftentimes it's more of an invitation. If you actually, say, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Often people want to talk. They want to talk because they've got all this stuff that's happening to them, and it provides them an invitation that you're there, that you're open and you're welcome. And when it gets right down to it, suicide is about pain. It's not somebody wanting to end their life. It's they want to end the pain that they're dealing with, and also end the life that they're living. So by actually having that conversation, you're bringing those up their opportunities to say, how can we hope? What are some of the good things that are happening? There's a bright light somewhere in that. So absolutely, it's not going to encourage somebody by talking about it.
Absolutely. And one of the ones that I've actually heard myself personally is that person is talking about suicide because they're looking for attention. And it floored me when somebody said that to me, but I'll let you speak to that.
Well, again, it is a myth, but often again, people sometimes they do leave little trails, and again, it's an opportunity for someone to have that conversation and open that conversation up. So it's looking for those invitations, as we call them, and it's not attention seeking. It's that person needs help, they need support, and in whatever manner form that takes. So again, it's that invitation to talk. If somebody is, showing signs, if they're, that messaging is coming across, again, it's just, it's a time to have a conversation.
And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those signs as we move more into the conversation. But we're going to talk about another myth as well. And one that is common is that somebody who's thought about suicide, every little small thing that happens to them is going to make them think about suicide also.
No, certainly, if somebody has suicidal ideation or has had a suicide attempt, just because they've have had that once doesn't mean that they're going to do it again, and that it brings back into that fear, that we don't know what to do, and whereas people can get help, they can get medications, they can get talk therapy, they can just talking to a friend, going out for coffee, that all brings back a structure that can support them to move forward. And absolutely, I think I'm very open about it. I think of my own suicide attempt, and just because I've done it once doesn't mean that I'm going to do it again, because I've been able to work through some things, I've had some support, and
yeah. And I think that's part of it too. I mean, opening the conversation, which is, and being open to conversation. And like I said, we're gonna delve even more into this. I think is so very important, because oftentimes we just look at someone and go, "How are you doing?" And it's
absolutely.
very easy for somebody who's depressed or stressed or has anxiety and possibly maybe thinking about ending their life. They're just gonna say, "I'm fine." Like there's more, and we're going to talk about some of the ways that some of the questions that we can ask to be a little bit more thorough. But one of the bigger myths too that stands out to me is that suicide is very sudden and unpredicted. Is that true?
No. Oftentimes to the family or to the friends, they may see it as very, very sudden. It's obviously a huge shock, but oftentimes there are little, what we want to call it, little tidbits that happen, and it could be something like, for example, giving away prized possessions, or maybe coming out and having dinner with family, or saying I feel hopeless, or I'm really depressed, I don't want to be here anymore. They isolate. So there's all these little things that sort of tell a bigger picture, but again, it's being open and again, having sort of following intuition and saying, especially if you're maybe a parent or a caregiver to a senior. We often see seniors, they will they'll stop eating, or they'll say, I would rather not be here anymore, and those are, again, those little telltale signs to say, oh, there's something that's not quite right here. Or it could be, a student who was really high performing student, and now they're really, really, really struggling. Or again, I'm not worthy, I'm not worth it, nobody likes me. So all of these things, these little things can add up to a bigger picture. And again, it's the people around us, the people we love, the people we care about, colleagues. It's being sort of sensitive to that, and if if you feel, I would say, kind of go with your gut. If you feel like something isn't right, then ask, like, find out, why are you feeling hopeless, what is going on. So I would say for the most part, there are little telltale signs, but oftentimes because of fear, because of, maybe not knowing, um, or just not really recognizing, it becomes, what do I want to say? It becomes more of a challenge.
Right, right. And I think one of the things that is important to share with people, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, by all means, is that if somebody's talking about suicide, you have to take it seriously, and you have to, and I took this information from your website too, where it's saying about, you have to listen carefully, you have to be very supportive, empathize with the person, and take it seriously. And that, to me, that's, if you're seeing these telltale signs. And we're going to talk about those questions coming up really shortly, of how we can delve into people, what they're thinking about. But to me, that's very important, is taking anything like that very seriously when you hear it.
Absolutely. If somebody's saying, I want to kill myself, it's not something, if you yourself can't provide any type of support, if you're not comfortable talking about it, then bring somebody else in, bring in another colleague, a friend, but take it seriously, because often by somebody saying that, they are reaching out. There's a cry for help there. And you don't have to be a therapist to help somebody who may be thinking of suicide. You don't have to be trained. Just being empathetic, being caring, being able to listen, maybe taking, even suggesting, crisis line, whatever. Just being there and being open and just being human and being kind is a good way to prevent suicide.
And if let's say, for instance, we're talking to someone and we're getting these signals that are coming across, is it good to reach out to the family of that person? Is it good to say, are you, if you're not family, or is that something that you should do, or is it more talking to the individual?
It's more about talking to the individual, because sometimes the person is maybe not connected with their family. They don't get along with their family. So, if you can, actually talk to the individual themselves, and say, is there somebody, a trusted person that you feel comfortable talking to? It could be an aunt, it could be a friend, it could be a school counselor, it could be anybody. But to ask them, rather than just sort of assuming, well, I'm going to go tell your mom, or I'm going to go and talk, tell your daughter. The focus is on them and what they need in that moment.
And I think that's really important. And I'm glad you said that, because we can't assume for sure. We're going to take a bit of a break, but when we do come back, we're going to talk about getting beyond how are you, and some of the things that we can ask people. So don't you go anywhere. Heather and I will be right back. Welcome back to Dufferin Life. I'm going to start this edition, if you're just joining us, to let you know that we're having a frank conversation about suicide. And some of this topic might be upsetting to you, and we wanted to make sure that you're aware of what Heather and I are talking about right now. Heather, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the ways that, if we're feeling like somebody is struggling, how to go beyond how are you, and some of the things that we can say to people to help them.
Well, I think, one of the conversations that we ask somebody, how are you doing? And people say, oh, I'm fine. And I think I'm fine is almost a dirty sentence, because it can be so inauthentic. And, actually asking somebody, what's happening with you? I've noticed that you're seeming a little down, or what's going on in your life right now, and providing those invitations that people can't just say, oh, I'm fine. So creating that conversation where you can really, get into some of the deeper conversation. when it comes to talking about suicide, because again, suicide is not a topic that people want to talk about. They're fearful of somebody on the other end saying, well, I'm feeling suicidal. And it's like, people go like, oh no, now what do I do? And it's just being about human and being, asking them, are you thinking about suicide? And actually using that sentence, are you thinking about suicide? And if they say yes, then to support that person in whatever way you can. And that could be, taking them to the hospital if they're in crisis, or calling a trusted friend for them, or somebody that they trust, connecting with them with a distress line, providing what you can. You don't have to be the problem solver. You can enable them to get help. You can walk beside them. You're not going to be able to solve their problem, but you are there. And I think that is one of the greatest gifts that we can give somebody who is thinking about suicide, is actually being there, being empathetic, and being kind.
I think so too. And I do want to reiterate what we said at the beginning of the show, that if you know somebody that's in crisis and it's immediate crisis, please do call 911 or take that person to the emergency room. As Heather's saying, is we're not their counselors. We can't solve their problems, but you can ask them, how are you coping with your problem? Yes. How are you taking care of yourself?
Yes.
Delve into it a little bit more to find that information. But if somebody is in immediate danger, please don't hesitate. Take them to the emergency.
Absolutely.
For sure. All right, my dear. So let's talk a little bit about proactive or protective ways that we can make ourselves feel better, and things that we can do for ourselves to hopefully improve our outlook on life.
Absolutely. I think, there's a number of things that, and a lot of this is coming out now, around since COVID, with, the self-care pieces, the taking care, how important it is to take care of ourselves. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond just, reading a book or taking a bubble bath, or whatever those things look. But it's also about taking care of your health. Have you gone to the dentist? Are you eating properly? Are you getting enough sleep? And also the other big thing is being connected with others. Isolation is a big factor in suicide. If you don't feel like you're connected with anyone or anything, it can bring a lot of feelings of isolation and hopelessness. So if you can connect with a family or a friend by phone every day, or perhaps there's we have an outdoor ice skating rink not too far away from here, and go out skating, or go for a walk, do something physical to get out of your space. Certainly the other piece that we often don't think about is our culture, and how we celebrate that culture, and whether it's our food, whether it's going to church, whether it's any ritual that people take meaning from. That's also a big protective factor, because again, it's meaning making for us. It makes us feel hopeful, and I think that's what protective factors are really about. So you've got the spiritual, you've got the cultural, you've got making sure you're eating properly, and I think the other big thing that we often forget, I think particularly as adults, is play. We get so wrapped up in, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to do this, but being spontaneous and doing something that you enjoy. I know it's certainly difficult during COVID, but I bought a keyboard, and I always wanted to learn how to play the piano, so I have a keyboard. So I go and play on my keyboard, and it makes me feel good. If you have a pet, that's people, a lot of people are get a lot of support and a lot of love from their pets. So it doesn't have to be some individual. It can be an animal. So there's just small ways that bring some peace, a little bit of joy. And I think I always say it doesn't have to be the big things that bring you joy and happiness. It can be something that's very small.
Yeah, and I think that's so vitally important. I mean, especially now in the past couple of years through the pandemic, because so many people that were only partially isolated became completely isolated. So what do you, I'm only asking your opinion and not for statistics, but did the rate of suicide increase throughout the pandemic?
No, surprisingly, it has remained fairly stable. Now we don't have up-to-date statistics, but certainly I think the protective factor in that is the fact that mental health is becoming more important. People are actually recognizing it. I think it's becoming more acceptable to say, I'm not feeling well, I'm feeling depressed, I need to go and get some help. So that in and of itself is a protective factor, that people are feeling more comfortable reaching out. I know workplace wellness is becoming again another piece that employers are saying, if you've got an EAP program or connect with your colleagues, or over Zoom or whatever that happens to be, is changing sort of the conversation, I guess, around mental health, which then changes the conversation around suicide. Because they're integrally connected. If you're feeling depressed, or perhaps you've lost your job, or you're not sure about the children are not sure about school, whether they're going back online, university students, not sure what they're, if they're online, if they're not online. All of these things are huge stressors. And let's face it, we're all in this together. We really are, and we're all needing support for our mental health in whatever manner form, whether it's something that's counseling, or whether it's, again, going back to the protective factors, like making sure you go out for a walk every day, or eating healthy food, or just disconnecting from technology, as well, giving yourself a bit of a break and not being so hard on yourself, saying, I can only do what I can. And that's okay. It's okay. It's okay not to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's so much negativity online that just, not ending your day watching the news, or not starting your day watching the news, because, or like, a lot of people like to watch the news first thing in the morning, but you know what, maybe you don't end your day thinking about all of the things that are happening in the world and how they're doing it. And just to touch on what you said about workplaces, and I've noticed too, that even the schools are now starting to reach out a little bit more in mental health. My son was saying, oh, you know what, we have a survey that we had to answer at school about how we're feeling. And I said, you know what, we never had that back in my day. We didn't have, how are you feeling at school? And they're doing that because they're trying to find out the ways that they can help students that may be struggling, that may be in crisis, that may be having completely stressed out over what's been happening through the pandemic. And I think that's absolutely the right foot forward to start having those conversations, for sure. And we did talk a little bit about the common warning signs. And one of the ones that I wanted to just mention is substance abuse. Is if you see people abusing alcohol, drugs more than they ever have before, reach out and ask those questions.
Absolutely. And the same eating disorders have increased also over the pandemic. So that's another area that, people might want to recognize in a loved one or someone that they really care about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to doing a segment on eating disorders as well, which hopefully will be coming up soon. But we've just got let's say we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we touch on some of the new programs and some of the events that you have coming up. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, Heather, and let you tell us all about what's going on, what's new.
The council's been actually doing a lot of work with our farming community, and we just published a small magazine called Grounded, which you can find on our website. It's a great magazine. It's filled with resources, but the other great thing about it is filled with real stories. Real farmers and the real struggles that they're having, and how they're overcoming them. And it's a publication for farmers by farmers. So that's we're really excited about that. We also next week we have a lunch and learn for veterinarians. It may be surprising to know that veterinarians have one of the highest suicide rates among professions. So we have a workshop for them called Taking It All On. And more information, again, can be on our website. And coming up in May, we are doing our second annual Pause-a-thon, 1,000 Pause for Suicide Prevention. So we are encouraging people to send in pictures of their pets. And we call it the pet effect. Certainly, there's this big, I guess what you want to call it, pandemic pets, but certainly I think our companion animals have played a big factor in our mental health, and absolutely a big factor in suicide prevention.
Well, that's absolutely amazing. You've been definitely keeping very busy since last you came on the show, for sure. And I think I just want to reiterate some of the things that we talked about today and the importance of opening the communication, breaking the stigma, and talking to people, listening to people, being empathetic. If you're seeing signs of something going wrong with somebody, asking deeper questions more than just how are you. And I think, Heather, I can't even thank you enough for sharing all of this information with us. And I mean, if there's anything left you'd like to share with the audience, please do so, as we've only got about a minute left.
Well, as I said, I'm very open about my own story, and I do know that I was very, very fortunate to have some amazing people in my life who helped me get out of a very, very dark place. And if somebody is in that place, reach out. There is somebody there. You're not alone, and you can do it. And yeah, just there is hope.
Wonderful. Heather, thank you again so much for joining us and giving us such important information. And we look to have you back again to do it again. Thank you so much. And all of you, take care of yourselves. And until next time, bye-bye for now.
Bye.